One of the great things about St. Mary Major, the church that we're dedicating today our Mass to, is that I was ordained there. And for me, it's just such a great memory to think of the beautiful church in Rome. There's, they call four major basilicas. So when you go to Rome, there's St. Peter's, there's St. John Lateran's, there's St. Paul outside the walls, and then there's St. Mary Major's. And each of them has, I mean, if you just only had that church in your diocese, you'd be like, that's the most beautiful church in the world. So they have four of them, and so that's what Rome does to you when you go there. But St. Mary Major's is special because it's one of the first churches dedicated to Mary. And just as, you know, a side note, under the altar, the relic they have is a part of the crib of Christ. So it's like, okay, they got Jesus's cradle there. That's a pretty good relic to have. And they also, when they were at history, or, you know, part of the legend is that they were looking for a place to dedicate a church to Mary. And the inspiration was wherever you see snow in August, on August 6th, that's the place to do it. And so it's also called the Church of Our Lady of Snow. But what was meaningful for me about the church was when I walked into the ordination. This is after I was on the remedial priesthood path. So most priests get ordained in about 6 years. It took me 14. So I failed many times in the novitiate and all that. So I had to do 2 of everything, where most priests, they get through in about 6 or 7 years. So anyway, it took me 14 years. And I always remember the night before the ordination, I was so nervous. And one of my dear friends, Father Peter Byrne, who's an Irish priest, I went to him to confession, and I was explaining in the confessional that here I am 14 years trying to get trained and be ready for this in my prayer life, my living of my vows, the knowledge of scripture, preaching, all these qualities that a priest need to have. And I'm about like at a 2, and I'm supposed to be at a 10, and I only have about a couple hours left. How am I supposed to go from 2 to 10 and what's left of my time, which is less than like a day, when I've had 14 years to prepare for this? And he just laughs and he goes, well, that's where God's grace does the work. And I wonder, at least in my own life, maybe it's something that happens to you as well, is when we have important moments, or there's like all these things seem to be leading to a place where we have to make big decisions or do important things, or big moments in our lives, what our go-to reaction is. Is it about us doing something? Like, I'm not this enough, or I don't have these qualities, or I don't have this. Because in today's first reading, I don't know if you heard that. That's pretty harsh, like what happens there. I don't know if you've tracked Moses, but he started off basically being given up to adoption, where he could have been killed, and then he goes through all this stuff. Then he gets, 40 years putting up with these people. It's a lot like being a parish priest So, it's like there's a lot there, And so he gets to a point where it's like, okay, there's no water. They're out in the middle of a desert. And he's seen this happen before. This wasn't his first rodeo. And what did he do before? He took his staff, he struck the rock as God said, and water came out. But God, teaching the people a little bit more, didn't want it to be about Moses' striking the staff. He wanted it to be more sacramental. In other words, taking the nature of some very simple things like a rock and words, kind of like what happens in a sacrament. You take very simple things like bread and wine and words, and then the Spirit works through that instrument to consecrate that. And he was challenging Moses to just simply trust in what he wanted, which was not to strike the rock, was simply to pronounce the words, and through that the water would flow. And so what does Moses do? He's being pushed, and he's like, coming to this moment where they've been out in the desert for so long, and it was as if he needed to do it. It was like it was up to him. It wasn't up to God's grace. It was up to him. And so not only does he strike the rock once, which God didn't want him to strike the rock this time, he just wanted him to say the blessing. He strikes it twice. And for that, God says, okay, you're not going into the Holy Land now. That is quite a price to pay. So I don't know. Sometimes we might lean on the fact that definitely God is merciful, he's kind, and he's slow to anger. But he's also the God that did not allow Moses to get into the Holy Land because Moses decided to take things into his own hands. I wonder if that's one of our biggest challenges in our lives, is that we see these moments in our life of big decisions, ordination, marriage, maybe things that you have to do in your family, maybe there's business things, maybe there's colleges, I don't know, whatever's going on in your life. And we wonder, are we grasping at the staff and stabbing it into the rock 2 times because it's going to be up to us? It's about my qualities. It's about my ingenuity. It's about my thinking, and it's about me and how I can do this. Or are we going to allow God to speak through us? And it's going to be his word and his grace that will be enough. Definitely, there's 2 moments. I mean, 2 of the greatest biblical characters are Peter and Moses, and they both today randomly suffer the same thing, that they're looking things through their myopic human vision rather than seeing and trusting in God's.